Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wa tamu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Welcome to all of you. This will be one of 6 different classes that we're hosting. The topics that we've chosen, the topics that I'll be covering, one of them is today's topic, which is on the virtues and benefits and special qualities of reciting the Book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Also tomorrow I'll be covering a detailed study of the hereafter and the soul. I'll give more details towards the end about that. And on Saturdays, I will be going through a detailed commentary on the Qasida Burda of Imam al-Busiri. Today's topic, inshallah, and I'll be continuing this topic every Tuesday at 9:30, is on reciting the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and its benefits. And I just want to kind of go through my idea and my thinking behind it first. Currently, the dilemma that we're facing, anyway, I assume it's most of the Western world, is seclusion has at least allowed us to contemplate, one, our existence, and two, our relationship with God. I was saying to my wife earlier that, you know, there's been kind of there's been an overwhelming kind of movement or wave against God in the last 4 to 5 or 10 years, new atheism, whatever it may be. And mankind had become such that, and not to say that this is a punishment, I'm not saying that this is a punishment from God, but it's definitely a moment of realization that Allah Jalla wa Ala has supreme power, omnipotence and control. And what I want to do in this particular lesson is revive our want, love, and kind of understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book is and why the Quran is so important for us. I am going to be going through a text, but for students of knowledge, if you want to know what a text is, I'll explain that in a second. But generally, I'll just be explicating and discussing and in detail the points from the book, rather than, I'm not going to go through this book through the Arabic online. I just want it to be quite general. The book is by an incredible scholar who passed away in 2002. His name was Sheikh Abdullah Sirajuddin, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was from the city of Halab in Syria. I was fortunate enough in 2002, at the age of 19, to attend his funeral. In fact, I went to see him a few weeks prior, and he was really unwell and at the hospital, and I couldn't meet him. I was fortunate enough to at least attend his funeral. He was considered one of the greatest scholars of hadith on the planet, and for many, many years actually. One of the special qualities of his actual books that he's written, and I think he has over 20 books that he wrote, is that the books are generally accessible to the public. It seems that although he was a great scholar, he didn't really write books for scholars or for students of knowledge. He wrote books that were not that technical and that benefited everybody. Now, this particular book, Tilawatul Quran al-Majid, Fadailuha, Adabuha, Khasa'isuha, speaks about many different things. Now, we have many scholars that have written about the Quran. One of them, Imam al-Nawawi, who wrote a wonderful book on the Quran and its etiquettes and its adab. Abu Dawud al-Sijistani was one of the early scholars to write about the Quran as well. This particular book, the reason I chose it is because there are certain topics in here that are very, very interesting, and I want to kind of cover those in particular, not on everything. Now, I want to start, inshallah, with an introduction to our current state of affairs, and then I want to move on to the different topics, inshallah. What we have to ask ourselves, me included in that, even though I'm a teacher of kind of sacred knowledge and I've been teaching for probably 15 years, but we have to kind of constantly ask ourselves the same questions. Is that, what is our general relationship on a day-to-day basis with the Book of Allah? And there are 2 elements to that. One is the mere recital, like, are we reading the Quran? But number 2, how much of it do we understand to even inculcate? Take, for example, the idea that all Muslims believe that the Book of Allah is divinely revealed and it has all the answers to our problems, etc. But how accessible is the Book of Allah for us? That's an important point that I want us to kind of think about. And what have we done? What means have we taken to better our relationship with the Book of Allah and have more access to it? Now, I was thinking earlier about the idea of parents. Now, I have 4 children. They all study Quran. My son's 13, youngest is 2.5, my eldest is 13, my daughters are 8 and 9. And they all go to masjid to study Quran as well. They don't read Quran with me. They are very good teachers in the local masjid that they study with. But why am I sending my children to the masjid to learn Quran? And anybody who has children, why do we send our children to the masjid? We send them to learn how to read the Quran. Well, interestingly enough, the very same parents, us, that send our children to the masjid so that they read Quran when they grow up, have become often, not all the time, have become parents now. And we ourselves have stopped reading the Quran, or we have a detachment with the Quran. So the very thing that we're trying to achieve for our children, we've almost failed ourselves, because we were supposed to be a product of that system, which goes to show that something's missing, definitely, because we've been through that process of, learn how to read Quran, and that will be sufficient. Now, I want to start. For those following the Arabic, I'll just mention the title of what part of the book I'm on. And the rest of you, I'll just tell you what I'm going to be covering, inshallah. First and foremost, I want to begin with the idea of divine and prophetic instruction to recite the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want to talk about some of the verses of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and also I want to look at what the Prophet said about why we should, or the importance of reciting the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, the Shaykh mentions as a title to this chapter, or this section, Al-Amru al-Ilahi Thumma Nabawi Bitilawat al-Quran al-Kareem, that a divine instruction and then prophetic instruction of why we recite, or why one should recite the Quran. And he mentions 2 verses, and very important verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah states, إِنَّمَا أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَعْبُدَ رَبَّ هَذِهِ الْبَلْدَةِ الَّذِي حَرَّمَهَا وَلَهُ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ وَأُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَأَنْ أَتْلُوَ الْقُرْآنَ. The end of that particular verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, speaking in these verses, talks about how we have all collectively been commanded, that's the inference in the verse, to read the Quran, where it states, وَأَنْ أَتْلُوَ الْقُرْآنَ, and I've been commanded to recite the book. In the second verse, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, أُتْلُ مَا أُوهِيَ إِلَيْكَ, to the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, that recite that which has been revealed upon you, مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ, and stand for prayer, or establish prayer. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ, that the prayer prohibits one and prevents one from fahsha, you could say evil, wal munkar, or disobedience and evil, if you wish. وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ مَا تَصْنَعُونَ, and God's mention or remembrance is greater than everything, and Allah Jalla wa Ala knows all that you do. Now, what's quite interesting here is these are clear instructions that the Messenger of God is being told in the Quran, that we reveal the book upon you to recite to the people, to read out aloud to the people, to spread its message. There are 2 elements to this that I want to focus on. The first one is, have we been commanded just to read the book of Allah, or have we been commanded to understand it also? Throughout the Quran, there's a clear message that the Quran is tibyan li kulli shay, that it's an explanation for everything. God talks about how He revealed the Quran in Arabic for people to understand easily, etc. The first verse was Surah 27, verse 91, and the second 29:45. So Naml was the second one. Now, the Shaykh mentions something very interesting here. He states that in a sound hadith that the Messenger of God, and I'll in detail talk about this hadith in a few minutes, inshallah, that the Prophet said, "Man qara'a harfan min kitabillah ta'ala falahu bihi hasana," that whoever reads even a letter from the Quran will receive its reward. And then the Messenger of God continues to explain what that is well, hasana bi ashri amthaliha, or ashri amthaliha, that particular reward has 10 additional rewards with it, or is equal to 10 normal rewards, you could say. Now, there's a wonderful hadith of Abu Dhar, and the Messenger of God mentions alayhi salatu wasalam that وعن أبي ذر رضي الله عنه أنه قال, that Abu Dhar said, قلت يا رسول الله, he said that I said to the Messenger of God, Awsini. And what's incredibly interesting is when the Prophet ﷺ was ever asked by somebody to give them advice, Awsini, his advice is a very direct, a very short, but incredibly important. In another hadith where a companion comes to the Messenger of God, he asks him for advice, and he says, La taghdab, like don't get angry. And then he says, thinking maybe, oh well, most of us who have got an anger problem, we all think that we don't have an anger problem, or most angry people think they're not very angry people. So he said, well, give me advice, I need something probably more than that. And the Messenger of God said, La taghdab. And then he asked the question again, like, okay, Awsini, also give me some other advice. And the Messenger said, La taghdab. And interestingly, at the end of the hadith, in one narration of it, he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, control your anger, la taghdab, and you will enter Jannah with ease. Now, interestingly, this wording is very, very important in hadith. The Sahaba constantly ask for advice from the Messenger of God. So Abu Dhar, he asks for advice from the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Prophet says, alayka bi taqwillah wa taqwallah, fa innahu ra'sul amri kullihi. That be cognizant, or be have self-awareness, be aware of Allah Jalla wa ala. What's wonderful about this word taqwa doesn't mean khawf, that's a different word, or khashya. These are two words for fear in Arabic, but taqwa doesn't mean either one. Taqwa is the idea that being observant of God in everything that you do, or in a different way. The famous Sahabi Ka'b, he was a great companion, a reciter of the Quran. Ubay, and Sayyidina Umar said to him, asked him, what does taqwa mean? And he said, have you never passed through a narrow passageway where there are thorns? He said, yes. He said, what do you do with your clothes? He said, I put them close to my body. He said, that's the meaning of taqwa, meaning to seek protection from things around you. So he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, that have taqwa, have this awareness, for indeed it's at the head of all affairs. It's at the head of all affairs. I mean, it's the most important thing. Then he said, Ya Rasulullah, zidni, O Messenger of God, and something else. Could I get something else as well? And the Messenger of God said, alayhi salatu wasalam, alayka bi tilawati al-Qur'ani. You must recite, alayka ismu fa'al, you must recite the book of Allah. فَإِنَّهُ نُورٌ لَكَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. It will be a light for you in the earth. And this light, of course, the book of Allah is a light in terms of guidance. It will be a kind of a pathway for you in the earth. وَدُخَرٌ لَكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. And it will be stored for you as a treasure, stored for you in the heavens, meaning when you pass away. Now, here an interesting topic. The Shaykh discusses an important topic, and he quotes a narration of Darimi, and although these hadith with these narrations in there, فيه النظر يعني, there is an issue with some of them, but they're quite common and famous, so I do want to kind of touch on them. He quotes a narration by Imam Darimi from Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala an, that he said, أكثر تلاوة القرآن قبل أن يرفع, which is a very odd and wonderful narration, that recite the Quran before it is taken away. قبل أن يرفع. Now, one meaning could be قبل أن يرفع could mean before you lose it, and we're going to talk about losing the Quran in a short while for individuals, for all of us. But many of the scholars have looked at this particular hadith and used other hadith about one of the signs of the Day of Judgment that's mentioned in some hadith, some narrations. I'm not here to talk about their authenticity or not, but they have been mentioned in some of the books. One narration states that in this particular narration they said to the Messenger of God, هذه المصاحف ترفع فكيف بما في صدور الرجال. Now, that this, by the way, sorry, is not from the Messenger of God. This is from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud himself. This is from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud himself. That they said to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that, okay, if the Masahif are lifted, the words are lifted, but we have people here that have memorized the Quran. And he writes that يسرى عليه ليلا فيصبحون منه فقراء وينسون قول لا إله إلا الله ويقعون في قول الجاهلية وأشعارهم وذلك حين يقع عليهم القول. That this idea that people will just wake up and it will be gone, there will be nobody to read, and people will just be, that this, he could have meant by this that a period will come where it will be as if it were overnight, that things would change. And I could definitely see that idea in play where the author Sheikh Abdullah Sirajuddin, I definitely could see the idea where time is moving very, very quickly, and the barakah is disappearing, and the ulama are dying very quickly. I mean, when I was in Damascus, all the senior scholars, I'm 70 plus, almost all of them, or 60 plus, almost all of them have passed away now, and very few replacements they had. There are still great Syrian scholars that are alive, but it just goes to show that things happened overnight to a degree. Another narration states that وَرَوْا ابْنُ مَاجَةَ وَالْحَاكِمُ وَالْبَيْهَقِي يُدْرَسُ الْإِسْلَامُ كَمَا يُدْرَسُ وَشْيُ الثَّوْبِ حَتَّى لَا يُدْرَى صِيَامٌ وَلَا صَلَاةٌ وَلَا نُسُكٌ ولا صدقة ويسرى على كتاب الله تعالى في ليلة فلا يبقى في الأرض منه آية وتبقى الطوائف من الناس الشيخ الكبير والعجوز يقولون أدركنا آباءنا على هذه الكلمة لا إله إلا الله فنحن نقولها. This is the more common narration that people are aware of, that Ibn Majah, Al-Hakim, Al-Bayhaqi narrate that yudrasul Islamu, that the religion of Islam will wear out, it will slowly disappear. Just as, and this is attributed according to some narrations to the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, just as embroidery wears out on a garment, just as the embroidery over time wears away. Hatta la yudra siyamun, such that the fast will not be known anymore to people, the month of Ramadan and fasting. Wala salat, no prayer. Wala nusuk, no hajj. Wala sadaqatun, and no charity. And this is in reference to zakat. Wa yusra ala kitabillahi ta'ala fi laylatin, and the book of Allah will be removed in a night. Fala yabqa fil ardi minhu ayah, and not a sign of it will remain in the earth. Wa tabqa tawaif min al-nas, and some people will remain. الشيخ الكبير والعجوز يقولون, an old man and a woman will say, أدركنا آباءنا على هذه الكلمة, that we took from our forefathers the following لا إله إلا الله فنحن نقولها, and we recite it or we read it. And this is incredibly interesting. Some attribute this to a statement of a companion. Some of them make it mursal. But we see some symptoms of that already that exist, or we can see that the fact that we're living post-religion now in most of the Western world, how this may come about, where the Quran will slowly disappear from people's hearts and people's minds and people's attention. And that's why it was very important for the Muslim Ummah historically that they always produce some hufaz, some people who memorize the Quran, to preserve the element of memorization. But that's not the problem we have now. We have a lot of hufaz. What's disappeared is people who actually understand the Quran are very few. And if you take that element away from society, then all you have left is musahif, essentially, just the musahif that you buy from the shop. And people may be able to read it, but they will have no understanding. So it shows that both of them, the ulama attempted to preserve in the past. They produced ulama, people that had studied Arabic. And interestingly, the study of Arabic is a fard kifaya. It's a fard on the community that some people have to study to preserve the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. I want to now talk about a few other topics, inshallah. One of them is this idea of the importance of staying in touch with the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim and Imam Ahmad all narrate a very important hadith from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, that he narrates from the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Messenger of God said, "Ta'ahadu hadha al-Quran, fawalladhi nafs Muhammadin biyadihi, لهو أشد تفلتا وفي الرواية تفصلا من قلوب الرجال من الإبل من أقلها. That the Prophet ﷺ said that be regular with the book of Allah, with the Quran, be regular with it. تعاهدوا هذا القرآن, be consistent with it, read it often. فوالذي نفس محمد بيده, for by the one who possesses the soul of Muhammad عليه الصلاة والسلام له أشد تفلتا وفي الرواية تفصيا من قلوب الرجال من الإبل من أكلها, that it will leave the hearts of mankind faster than a camel leaves its rope, which shows that if people don't stay on top of it, meaning the practice of reading, if people don't, and we witness that kind of in our own lives when we fall out of reading the book of Allah, we probably wait till the next Ramadan to do it. And and I'm not here telling people that, picking people out or saying people should do this or do that, but just generally, how much have we lost in losing that relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We've lost an enormous amount of khair and goodness. In another hadith, so the Shaykh says, أن المؤمن ينبغي له أن يحافظ على تلاوة القرآن الكريم خشية أن يتفلت منه وينساه, that one should always protect the recitation of the Quran, in out of fear that it'll just disappear from us or we'll forget it. Then he quotes another hadith, a very important hadith, where the Messenger of God عليه الصلاة والسلام said, إنما مثل صاحب القرآن كمثل الإبل المعلقة, that one who reads the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala, shukran for the link, one who reads the book of Allah is like one who firmly ties his camel. In ahada alayha amsakaha, that if it stays tied, if he persists, that make sure that everything's there and the camel stays tied, that amsakaha, he will definitely control the camel. When atlaqaha dhahabat, but if he loosens it or if he frees it, it will run away. Now some of the ulama mention here that why did the Messenger of God mention a camel? He said the camel is often one of the most difficult animals to control, and that somebody who really has a good relationship with the book of Allah has a firm relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it takes a lot of struggle as well. In another hadith, the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, it's narrated by Imam Tirmidhi, and he authenticated it, إِنَّ الَّذِي لَيْسَ فِي جَوْفِهِ شَيْءٌ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ كَالْبَيْتِ الْخَرِبِ, that one who does not have anything in his mouth from the Quran, meaning one who doesn't recite anything at all, his example is like that of a house that's been obliterated or destroyed, meaning there's nothing there. It's an empty shell, and that's the example that the Messenger of God gave alayhi salatu wasalam. In another hadith narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, أُرِدَتْ عَلَيَّ أُجُورُ أُمَّتِي حَتَّى الْقَضَاةُ يُخْرِجُهَا الرَّجُلُ مِنَ الْمَسْجِدِ وعرضت علي ذنوب أمتي فلم أرى فيها ذنبا أعظم من سورة من القرآن وآيات أؤتيها رجل ثم نسيها. Now I'm going to give a particular take on this hadith. The hadith states that the Messenger of God said alayhi salatu wasalam, that I was shown the deeds of my community. I was shown all of the deeds, the good and the bad. And أُرِدَتْ عَلَيَّ أُجُورَ أُمَّتِي, that they're good deeds, such that meaning it could mean here that I was given, I was informed about the reward for each action that my ummah will perform, even some rubbish that a man will pick up from the masjid, meaning even to that degree I was told that he would receive reward for that. And also I was shown the sins of my community. فَلَمْ أَرَى فِيهَا ذَنْبًا, but it could mean that the Messenger of God saw all of these things as well. I did not see a sin greater than a surah or a chapter of Quran that somebody received and then they had forgotten it. I want to talk about nisyan here, what this hadith may mean. I'm more in line with the thinking that this narration is more talking about that where somebody has learnt a chapter of the Quran, the meanings of the Quran, the ma'ani, and they've received that instruction, and then they put that instruction to a side. They leave it. They don't follow it through, or they forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they leave it to one side. It could also mean that somebody memorizes the Quran or parts of it and then completely forgets it. Of course, it could mean that, but it could mean the meaning of the Quran, that particular meaning that they took, that they didn't inculcate it. Abdullah bin Umar, he said, it took me many years to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah. When they asked him why, he said, because I tried to practice or inculcate everything that I had learned. So that's a kind of a take, what we can take from that particular verse. But there's a great kind of ta'reed there and a tahdir of disconnecting from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and being away from people kind of brings us back to that. You know, we're temporal beings, and our temporality forgotten often, and it's forgotten because we are overcome by engagement with the world and with people. Take for instance, what's incredibly interesting with this pandemic that's going on. But look how we've treated the animal kingdom in the world. Look how we've treated the animals. Animals have all come out now. I mean, the nitrogen levels that in China have completely reduced now. They're probably increasing again now. We've this world that Allah Jalla wa Ala gave us. لَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah said, we beautified, the cosmos or the universe for you. And then Allah continues in that verse and talks about how we made the earth inhabitable for you. We made it inhabitable, that there's nowhere else in the universe that's inhabitable that we know of, where humans can inhabit. And God says we made it inhabitable for you, and then yet we've destroyed it. And we constantly forget these kind of messages that God gives in the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, until death reaches the throat of a person, and then it's for all of us it's too late. Now I want to look at another topic that the Shaykh discusses, and that's the overwhelming benefit and the merit of reciting the book of Allah. Tilawatul Quran al-Karim afdalul ibadat. That reciting the book of Allah is the greatest of worship. And this Ibn Malik narrates a hadith which is marfu, which is attributed to the Messenger of God. It says, afdalul ibadati qira'atul Quran, that the best of worship is reciting the book of Allah. Daylami has a similar narration that a'budun nasi aktharukum tilawatan al-Quran, that the most the greatest worshippers are the ones that read the Quran the most. Now, I do want to make a differentiate here, something very, very important. Just because one reads the Quran, it doesn't make them pious. Just because one prays it doesn't make them pious. Just because one prays Tahajjud. How often have we seen people who read a lot of Quran, but it doesn't go beyond their throats, it doesn't penetrate, and it doesn't permeate to their hearts. And but when we see them reading Quran, we think, what a pious person. The Sunnah is very important here. All of this needs to be taken with the ideas of taqwa, the ideas of humility, the idea of removing arrogance from oneself, not showing off. With all those ideas, it's not sufficient that you just read the Quran. And on that note, I did note as well that I want to talk about meaning versus translation, and just a point on translation as well. A lot of people ask, well, how do I communicate with the Quran when I'm reading in Arabic? And the number one, we're going to cover the hadith in a few minutes, inshallah, about the reward for each harf. But you will get general reward for reciting the Quran, even if you don't understand it. If you read the Arabic, there's reward there. But the Quran was revealed to understand, and so get a good translation. And this idea that people shouldn't read translations that be misguided, the Quran was revealed for everybody. I've even heard, somebody said to me once, I said to them, why don't they asked me a question? I said, read this particular surah in the Quran, and he said, do I need permission for that? You receive. I mean, this is absurd. The Quran is revealed by God for people to read, to recite. The first verse was revealed to the Messenger of God was a verse to recite. So, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So why wouldn't you recite the Quran? Get a good translation. Two of the ones I would recommend. One of them is by Dr. Abdul Halim, published by Oxford Press, I think. His translation is quite good, quite impressive. And the other, maybe Usama, you can write it up in the message. And the other is by Ali Unal, a Turkish scholar, who has a good translation. There are some parts that I differ with, but generally, on the whole, it's a very good translation. There are some translations that are not very good. The general ones in that populate most, that you find in most masjids, those translations, some of them are not very good. The Noble Quran, I don't rate it as a very good translation at all by Mohsen Khan. Even the Sahih International is not very good. I think Dr. Abdul Halim's is just on point. It's a very, very good translation. And you should all get a translation and work through that if you don't understand Arabic. In terms of Arabic, I would recommend, to be honest, that everybody study Arabic to at least a basic level where you can recognize the words in the Book of Allah. That's not very difficult to do. I've been teaching Arabic for, a decade and a half. And it's not difficult to get a grip of the basics, where you learn at least the vocabulary of some of the Quran, that when you're reading it, you can understand some of it. And it's an onus on everybody to take that up, invest our time in that. It's very, very important, I think. Another hadith, أعبد الناس أكثرهم تلاوة للقرآن وأفضل إبادة الدعاء. The Prophet ﷺ, this mursal narration from one of the tabi'een, who narrates that the most devoted of people in one's devotion and worship is one who reads the Quran the most, and the best of forms of ibadah is dua. Next, I want to talk about the great rank of people who attempt to study the Quran. And by that I mean there's several things. So I'm going to divide study up into number one, at the basic level, how to read the Quran. So that's how to recite the basics of it. And you shouldn't be ashamed if you've forgotten how to read the Book of Allah. At the end of the day, as long as you're willing, it's a new moment that Allah's given you. As long as you're willing to learn, then you should forget about that and not worry too much about it. But what you do next is very important. If you've forgotten to read the Quran, or your recitation is not very good, there are plenty of tajweed courses and online, offline, that you can attend. Go out there or online and just restart from the basics, from Alif Bata, and there's no shame in that. And the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said in a wonderful hadith, narrated by both Imam Bukhari and Muslim, and Aisha radiyallahu anha قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم الماهر بالقرآن مع السفرات الكرام كرام الأبررة والذي يقرأ القرآن يتعتع فيه وهو عليه شاق له أجران. It's a wonderful hadith. It's a wonderful hadith. Now, the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, Al-Mahiru bil-Quran. Al-Mahiru bil-Quran. Somebody who is proficient with the Quran. And this is why the Qur'an al-Amilin, the people who have a proficiency over the Quran, reading it and understand its meaning. It's not sufficient that the Qur'an, the people who recite the Quran, have wonderful voices. They must know what it means as well. They must know what it means. And the Messenger of God said, somebody who has proficiency, al-mahiru bil-Qur'ani, he said, will be with the safara. It's interesting, this word safara, because safar means to travel. And so who are the safara? That he will be with the safara, meaning his rank is with the safara. And then he said, ma'a safaratil kiram al-barara. He added another word. Now these two words have been mentioned in the Quran, bi-aidi safara kiramin barara. So Allah does mention these two words in relation to angels. So the ulama have two general opinions about who this person will be with, in which rank. One opinion is that the angels who document things, humul kataba, he will be with them. He will be of that rank. And another opinion is that he will be with the angels, alladhina hum hamalatul lawh al-mahfuz, that carry the mighty preserved tablet of Allah Jalla wa'ala. A tablet can be, we don't know what it is, but it contains information, that much we know. He will be with them. And the reason some of them say that they call safara, from the word safar, is because they bring the book of Allah Jalla wa'ala from the law to the prophets, كأنهم سفرة, as if they're ambassadors bringing the message. So one will receive that rank. What's beautiful at the end of the hadith is what the Messenger of God mentions about one is who's not proficient. In fact, he mentions the complete opposite. He says, وَالَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ وَيُتَعْتِئُ, one who reads the Quran but he stutters, and it's very difficult for him to read. وَهُوَ عَلَيْهِ شَاقٌ, and this often happens with people, let's say from the subcontinent. We have an alphabet that is essentially an Arabic alphabet, but we pronounce a letter slightly differently. So Dad will be a Zwad, for instance. And we don't have an Ain, the Ra is different. We have a Re, we have different types of it. So on many people from the subcontinent, historically, it had been quite difficult for them to get to grips with tajweed, or a good level of tajweed, unless they really dedicate a lot of time. Considering a lot of these people were from the village, or they weren't those educational outlets, so they probably struggled even more with that education, especially the women who in villages were really poorly educated. So the Messenger of God says, وَيُتَعْتِئُ فِيهِ وَهُوَ عَلَيْهِ شَاقٌ, that it's difficult for him. لَهُ أَجْرًا, he will receive 2 rewards for that. Which shows that, that journey, that struggle of learning the Book of Allah, it's very important and very rewarding as well. Now, I want to finish off here before I take questions, inshallah ta'ala, and just talk about the communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Shaykh mentions a wonderful section and a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Anas ibn Malik, which states, إِذَا أَحَبَّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يُحَدِّثَ رَبَّهُ فَلْيَقْرَأِ الْقُرْآنَ. If one wishes, yearns to communicate with the divine, then he should read the Book of Allah. And then he goes on to talk about the idea that what we mean by this is when you read the Quran, you're in divine communion, you're actually in communication with the Almighty, and that's what's meant in this particular hadith. And we kind of often forget that. We forget how spectacular and important the Quran is. Something that's something that's transcendent, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we should try even a little bit to read a little bit. I'm not one of those people who ever says to people now, oh, go and read a page a day or a juz a day. Even if we can read a few verses a day and stay in touch with the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and maybe a meaning with that would completely change our relationship with the Book of Allah. We often look at answers for conspiracy theories and things of superstition and Ya'juj and Ma'juj and Dajjal and all these things, because they excite us, because for us there's something from the unseen. But the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Kalamullah, which is an attribute of God. Although the word of God divides into 2 types in the theological discussions. But the fact that we are reading what Allah sent or revealed upon the Messenger of God is absolutely incredible. And just if we can, from this first lesson, revive that kind of intention, in the following lessons, inshallah, I'm going to be covering quite a few different topics. One of them will be the etiquette with the Book of Allah. Also, tips on how to build a relationship with the Arabic language when reading the Quran. And also the types of verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, and the wisdoms of different things I'm going to mention in the Quran. Why did Allah reveal 1/3 of the Quran in the form of stories? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم وأتوب إليه وأسأل المسلمين. I'll see everybody tomorrow, inshallah.